Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero show with me, your host Simon Conboy. We're continuing on with the season preview series once again today. This episode will be focusing on the Cincinnati Bengals. So for those of you who haven't seen one of these episodes before, what I'll be doing is going through my projected starters for the 2017 season. Of course, we do have some time until training camp and pre-season, but if the team were to play a game tomorrow, this is how I suspect they would line up. Then I will be going through my projected record for the 2017 season, giving you some of my thoughts behind that and some of my thoughts on the team's schedule. Before giving my 3 key areas for this season, if this team's going to overachieve, make a push back for the playoffs, these are the areas that are going to have to come together in order to enable that. So moving on with the offensive starters, at quarterback, of course, we've got Andy Dalton. I think we know who he is at this point. He's this generation's Alex Smith. He's a perfectly acceptable starter. He's not going to blow teams away. He's not the most physically skilled, but he's when he's got the players around him, he can certainly win games, lead this team to the playoffs. We've seen it in the past. I don't think there's any threat to his position, barring a very poor season. Coming in with the running backs, which is a group I'm incredibly high on this season. We've got Joe Mixon, the rookie. I'm convinced he'll be the starter. He was incredibly talented. It was only off the field issues that I think stopped him being a top 20 pick in this year's draft. He can do everything at a reasonable level. I'm pretty convinced he's going to be a star in this league. He'll be sharing the load with Gio Bernard, who I think offers the best sort of change of pace third down back. He's a great receiving weapon. He's elusive and can pick up chunk yardage. Jeremy Hill, I still expect to see some snaps, maybe as a goal line back, and just to give Mixon a spell. This is a really talented group. Think they could be very, very dangerous, especially if they're all utilised effectively. Receiver this year, bit of changeover. Of course, you've got AJ Green as the number 1. He's one of the best players in the league at that position. He's an absolute stud. No holes in his game. Does everything well. I think Tyler Boyd starts the season as the number 2. He's been very spotty thus far in his career. Talent is clearly there. I think he could end up being an effective number 2. I'm not sure it ends up being the case, but I think he starts there. And I've got John Ross currently listed as the number 3. What more is there to say? Guy is fast. He's got a lot better hands than I think people give him credit for. His tape is pretty good. Even if you take away the speed, I think he's a pretty skilled receiver. Of course, he's always going to be compared to guys like Deshaun Jackson. I think he might be a more polished player than Deshaun Jackson was coming out of college. Of course, if he can have that kind of a career, that would be great for the Bengals. I think he'll end up working his way into number 2 role, but I do think it might take a while. I'm pretty sure this ends up being the 3, but we will see if anyone else manages to battle into that group. At tight end, another very talented player, Tyler Eifert. The only knock on him has been his ability to stay healthy, but he's been a great red zone weapon. He's one of the top receiving tight ends in all of football. If he can stay healthy, this is going to be a very dangerous skill position group. And then moving to the offensive line, which has had continuity for the longest time. There's finally some significant changes. Offensive tackle, I've currently got Ogbuehi. One day I'll research how to say that correctly. And Jake Fisher. Both have been... both were drafted with the intention of this one day being the situation. Neither one has impressed in limited sort of action thus far, so I'd be slightly concerned with this with the Bengals. Of course, losing Andrew Whitworth, who was one of the best tackles in the league for the last decade, is going to hurt them. I'd be very surprised if these two do not end up being the starters. How they perform will be a massive factor for this team. At guard, Clint Bowling, who's an acceptable player. I think he's a good pass protector, an adequate run blocker, not particularly exceptional, but perfectly adequate player. And Andre Smith, I suspect, will be getting the start as well. Smith, has had an up and down career, to say the least. Some great years at right tackle, some years where he's been very overweight and had conditioning issues. Guard may be a more natural fit for him. He's certainly got the potential to be a great guard. It's just you never know what you're going to get with him. We'll see this upcoming season. And Russell Bodine at centre. I think he struggled last season. This year, maybe in a bit more experience, he might perform a little better. And then at kicker, Randy Bullock, who's been a perfectly reasonable NFL kicker for a while. So this group is a pretty interesting one. It's kind of like when I was discussing the Jags yesterday, albeit a lot steadier at quarterback, of course, with Dalton. As I say, I think you know what he is at this point in his career and what he offers. The skill group is very talented but young, so I expect maybe a slow start there. We saw last year without AJ Green and Tyler Wright, you take those two away, there's really not much else there. I think you're going to have to wait a while for guys like John Ross to adapt to the NFL game, so I expect a bit of a slower start. The run game certainly has the ability to carry this team. I'm just incredibly dubious about this offensive line. Last year was the first time in a while that they've had a subpar group. In the years before that, they'd been absolutely exceptional for the most part, particularly in pass protection. And Dalton had, I think, was one of the first times last year we saw him under a reasonable amount of duress. And I think he struggled, and I think that could be the case again this year. This group, I think, will go as the line goes. If the line allows it, they're going to be productive, potentially very much so, if those youngsters can develop quickly. But I'm tempering my expectations until I see how this line performs. Moving on to the defensive starters. At defensive end, Carlos Dunlap and Michael Johnson will, I suspect, be starting. Dunlap's a solid player. He's threatened with becoming a top player at the position previously, but he's never quite managed to get over that hump. But he's a good defensive end, plays the run reasonably well, is a solid pass rusher. Michael Johnson, who had that 1 year before he went to Tampa where he was very productive as a pass rusher. Other than that, solid run defender, but doesn't offer too much in terms of edge rush. Defensive tackle, Geno Atkins is one of the top players in the league at the position. He's an absolute stud. Pat Sims, I think, will play more of a nose tackle type role. Of course, losing DeMarco Pico, who's been there for a long time. I don't think this is too much of a downgrade. Pico started to slide. If Sims can play the nose tackle role well, Geno Atkins will do enough of the pass rushing. At backer, I think we've got maybe some questions. Kevin Minter, I expect to be the middle linebacker. He was signed from the Cardinals where he played that position. Could potentially be Burfict there and Minter on the outside, but not sure. It could go either way. I think Vincent Ray is probably the third linebacker just because of the experience. I think that spot is wide open. Burfict and Minter will certainly be starters, and they're both reasonably good players. Minter had a pretty good year pretty good season in Arizona last year before signing this deal. At corner, Adam Jones, also known as Pac-Man, he's had a really great late career. Seems to have finally matured after some disastrous early seasons, but he's turned into a really solid cornerback for this team. Without him, I'd be very dubious because I suspect Kirkpatrick and Darqueze Dennard will be the second and third corners respectively. Neither one's really lived up to their draft stock. Kirkpatrick in particular has been a bit of a disappointment for me. I was a big fan of his coming out of college. Not that he's been terrible, he's just not really stepped up. They're both okay, but I think they both require a degree of help. They seem to struggle with, Dennard, I think there's a bit of room for some development there. But Kirkpatrick, I think at this point we know what he is, and that's maybe an average NFL corner at best. I don't like him in man coverage, which is a surprise. That's why I thought he'd be good in this league, but it's not necessarily been the case. But possibly some room for someone to step in there alongside Jones, but I suspect this is the way they're going to go. Safety, George Aloka has quietly been a very good player the last few years. It looks like Sean Williams will be playing alongside him. I don't know too much about Williams at this point. I will have to check the tape there. But Aloka is a player I like. If he can keep up the last couple of years sort of standard of play, then the Bengals will be happy with that. And at punter, Kevin Huber. Now, defensively, this is a team that I think historically, over the last few years, the Bengals have been, up until last year, sort of very consistent. I think they've lost a lot of talent. I think Dunlap hasn't necessarily developed the way they would have hoped. It looked like he was going to be a very promising player. Michael Johnson's been a disappointment in the last few years. They're solid at a lot of spots, but there's just not a lot of impact talent. I mean, you've got Atkins, Burfict will make some plays, and Adam Jones, but there's not a huge amount there. I'm concerned about the pass rush. I think they really struggled in that area last season. I don't see any reason to believe that's going to be better this year. The corners, as I say, Adam Jones is getting up there in age. If he falls off, I think they become an issue. It's just, it looks like a solid group, but I just feel there's just not enough difference makers there. But and for that reason, I think this team is going to struggle defensively to stop a lot of the high-powered attacks they're going to end up having to face. I mean, this year they've got to deal with the NFC North, so that means you've got some decent quarterbacks coming to town into Stafford and Aaron Rodgers, of course. So those could well end up being tough games. Of course, you've got to play the Steelers twice a year. The AFC South's got some talent in Andrew Luck, Marcus Mariota. I expect to have a big year, and if Bortles can get pull his finger out, it could well be tough. And even Sam Bradford, he's got weapons there if that line can protect. So for that reason, I don't think this schedule's enormously difficult. I think the AFC North is, outside of the Steelers, a pretty weak group heading into this season. The AFC South, there's no one outstanding there. But I'm just really down on this Bengals team. And, they really let me down last year. So, I mean, they finished 6-9-1. I thought they were finally going to make a push and win at least a playoff game. But this year, I just think they take a step back. I think the offensive line hinders them enormously. I don't think the defence and Andy Dalton are good enough to win games for this team. I think once again AJ Green stars, but we realise that this team really has lost a huge amount of talent over the last couple of seasons. As a result, I've got them finishing 5-11 for this season with a high draft pick next year, and I think that may end up potentially starting a bit of a rebuild in Cincinnati and cost the very much a long-term coaching staff in Marvin Lewis and co their jobs. In order for that not to happen, though, if this team wants to get back to where it's been over the last few years and potentially even win a playoff game, there are some key areas that are going to have to come together. The receiving position, someone besides AJ Green is going to have to step up. Last year, AJ Green was having a monster season before his injury. I've got no doubt, as long as he's healthy, he's going to continue doing what he does. But there needs to be somebody else there. Green can be more dangerous if a guy like John Ross or Tyler Boyd can provide another option as a legitimate number two. If they can both step up, then great. This group, along with Eifert, looks absolutely fantastic and will present major matchup problems. But if that doesn't happen, once again, teams are just going to be able to focus on not losing to AJ Green, and Dalton may struggle. The defensive ends is another spot. As I hinted at there, last year this team really struggled to generate too much pressure, particularly from the edges. They have to do a better job. As I say, I'm not enamoured with this secondary or the overall talent level. Geno Atkins, if you can get him some support, this team can be productive. Dunlap can continue doing what he does. They just need to find that another pass rusher to produce. Otherwise, I think this defence is going to be very average at best. And then the offensive line, they lost a lot of talent and experience over the last couple of off-seasons. I mean, losing Kevin Zeitler as well as Andrew Whitworth, their two best linemen, that's tough. And I think last year was the worst line they fielded in a while, and it's just hard to imagine it being better. These new starters are going to have to perform and perform early. I just think this team's going to need the run blocking to be effective. Andy Dalton does not operate fantastically when he's not kept clean. So they're going to have to be good. They absolutely do. If they don't, I think this team really is doomed. I think as much as the other two areas are important, the offensive line is absolutely going to have to, seize the day this season. Otherwise, it's going to be a long year in Cincinnati, which is, as I've said, that's what I'm predicting. So there you have it. That's the 2017 Cincinnati Bengals. Apologies, Bengals fans. I know probably a lot more down on your team than most, but some teams fall off, and I do think this is the kind of a degree of rot has set in with the Bengals. Whilst I do think they got a lot better through the draft, I think they're a year away from potentially resurging on that side of the ball, and I do think this team needs a lot more help. So, as always, let me know, what do you think? Do you agree, disagree? Any players you think I should keep an eye on that you believe should potentially be starting for this team? Give us a shout, whether it's the comment section below, whether it's via the Cover Zero Facebook page, or find me on Twitter. Always happy to talk football. As always, if you've enjoyed it, check out some more of the shows. Covered 9 teams already at this point. Going to go through all 32. Friday will be the weekly review. This week I'm going through cornerbacks. So that was a good list. That was fun to do. I hope you check that out. Hopefully we'll have an announcement as to what we'll be doing on Friday soon enough. Got 2 more weekly reviews and hopefully doing something a little bit different. And if you enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon and all that good stuff. It's always greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure as always. Have a great evening and go Bucks.